education through the Orthodox Christian Network. This is a ministry of the Greek Orthodox Church of St. George. I'm Michael Howdis, your facilitator, and I apologize. We're getting started a little bit late. We usually try to start around 11:30 Eastern. I know a lot of people watch this later anyway, but we have a lot going on in our church today. So you might hear people be coming in and out. We have a small learned group in here. So I'm just going to dive right in. We'll see how far we get today. And as always, for those of you watching online, we invite you in to listen to this discussion we're having in this room here. And if you have any comments, put them in the chat. If I see them, I try to look at them. I'll try to address them. So today we're talking about this lesson or discussion is called Icons, Truth, and Avoiding Hypocrisy. So just really quick, for the last several weeks, we've been, our theme this year has been Icons, Christ, and Life. And we've been talking about really discussing icons and an iconographic orientation to reality that helps us, again, just one of many things that helps us perceive more clearly Christ, the Holy Spirit, and seeing deeper. The theme of this class is really inspired by this book. It's called From Object to Icon by Orthodox author Andrew Williams. I'll be quoting him quite a bit. But really the theme this year is just, again, we choose something every year to just have us look deeper, grow spiritually so that we can all become the Christians we're supposed to be. So for the last few weeks, we've been talking a lot about veils, the symbolism of veils in the scriptures, the veils that are over our eyes that cause us not to be able to see as clearly as we should, but yet we can slowly remove the veils. To do so, we talked about Old Testament usage of that word. Good morning, Susan. Christ, the veil of his flesh. We talked about all those kind of things. And we got into the sin of idolatry to an extent. And we alluded to the fact that we're the opposite of veil as a mask. And so today we're going to kind of delve into the mask we wear and talk about hypocrisy a little bit. Again, not to condemn us per se, but just to kind of alert us to the things that we can do, sometimes directly or deliberately, sometimes inadvertently, that cause us to say we believe one thing or profess to something and then behaving a little bit differently. So I'm just going to start off, and this is a very good group in this room, very learned group. So we're going to just start off with a discussion. What's the obvious difference between a veil and a mask? Hey, Mary. We just got started.
A veil shows a little bit of what's underneath, whereas a mask that shows nothing.
Nothing. Yeah.
It shows something false.
Yeah, I had written here in my notes, the difference between reveal and conceal, right? So this author I just mentioned, he said, things of ultimate significance are veiled, but veils make visible the contours of reality. Just like we've talked the last few weeks. A veil, like an icon, communicates the presence of a person, where a mask obscures, hides, and gradually destroys. And then the Seventh Ecumenical Council declared iconography as a sacramental mystery of the Church, embodies and introduces us to that presence, capital P, his presence. So I think I'm going to bring something up and just for you to react, that hiding our face symbolically and presenting another face publicly may seem benign in some instances, but I guess the question is it demonic? Is that too strong a word to attach to that type of behavior? I do these pregnant pauses sometimes to just give people a chance to think and speak. So
maybe. I mean, I think you'd have to put it into context, because while in some cases it can certainly be.
Come on in.
In some cases it could be demonic. I think in other cases there are some
room filling up now.
There are some situations where I would call it more of a sickness, illness, that doesn't necessarily rise to the level of demonic. I think you have to put things in context. There are certainly demons out there.
Mhm.
And sometimes that can be, demonic, as we see many examples of Christ and or the apostles, you know, getting rid of demons out of people. But there are other situations where people weren't demons, but they still had a mask on. I'm thinking of things that comes to mind as, like, say, Zacchaeus, for example.
Mhm.
I don't think Zacchaeus was demonic, but he definitely had a mask on as a tax collector. And, once called, you know, he responded. So I think you have to put those. I mean, I don't think it's like a cookie cutter where one size fits all.
Yeah. No, and the reason I had that in my notes, kind of with an underlying question mark, I was thinking about the nature of mask, and I was thinking about being fully present versus not being present versus a false presence. That's where I was thinking about to myself, because I think about, you and I were talking about social media. I was thinking about social media and publicists and image builders, and then, interactions with people. Who are we really present with? Are we fully present with our real selves with people, or is it a veneer we're presenting? And I started just thinking about that, and how does that relate to demonic? Now, demonic's a strong word because of what it connotes, right? We think of The Exorcist and all that stuff, but I was thinking about just the nature of things, and I started thinking about, the father of lies, and when you speak your native tongue, right? Because what's Satan always doing? It's usually a deception, something appearing as something that it's not, and that's the connection I'm making, or we're trying to explore. I don't necessarily have a firm conclusion. I'm trying to be provocative here to get a discussion going, because these are the things I was thinking about when it comes to wearing the mask, and do we just accept it as, it's kind of benign? That's how it always is. People are one way and present another, or is there something really more sinister that we just become so used to it that we don't think about it anymore?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
saying in the language, he's a wolf in sheep's clothing.
Mm-hmm.
And many times that is that mask that's revealed. But Satan himself wears a mask.
Right.
So.
Angel of light, bringing darkness. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I really started thinking, because as I pondered this, I wonder, studying this issue, how far do you take it? How dangerous is it really? And the conclusion I'm coming to, again, the beauty of these discussions are, we want things to be challenged. So I don't come into the room thinking, oh, I'm here to lay out all the answers for everybody. I'm here to just put things out there, and let's see what kind of collectively what we come to. But I've come to the conclusion now that I really think that this is something pervasive, something very dark, and something we just accept.
And Satan masked himself as the serpent.
Mm-hmm.
Also, in order to, connive. So.
Right, and the word serpent, the Hebrew word, it's seraph, right? Mm-hmm. So, what's what here? Angel, it's it's hard to tell. Go ahead, George.
Yeah, I actually had a question for you. You were talking about being present, and,
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking. I need you to sound on that a bit.
Sure.
There's the day-to-day thing where you see somebody, how are you? Fine. It's just your regular greeting. The old joke. Oh, how you doing? Say, oh, I got a crash and everybody's all sick and in the hospital. Oh, wonderful. Have a nice day, right? They didn't even listen to you. It's just what they do. But when you say present, and then you're talking about the demonic, are you just talking about your awareness? I want you to kind of clarify that a little bit. Because you talk about three different presences, like you're really present, you're not. Are you talking about presence in relation to thinking as a Christian and being there?
What I'm getting at ultimately at a very high level is whenever you are present, are you present? Let me start there, right? And of course, casual greetings is not a time to necessarily, get into all everybody's problems or whatnot. Let me illustrate an example here as a teacher facilitator, right? I could be fully present and try to be fully honest as best I can about what I know or don't know. I can be conscious that I'm on camera, that maybe I have to have an image of maybe being smarter than I am. Things like that can creep in. And so it's always about being real, being, with your gifts, your flaws, everything as best you can. I mean, Romans 3:23, we all fall short, but that's what I mean. So then if a situation demands being fully present, how do you then respond to it? I'm trying to think of a family dynamic. Like sometimes in families, everybody has a role. Someone's the disciplinarian, someone's the savior, but maybe that's not, maybe you have to be more conscious of your roles and be more honest when you're dealing with a situation. If you're the savior in the family, maybe in that situation, you can't do anything or you have nothing to offer, but maybe you feel pressure to be something more than you are. I'm talking about being, fully present. And what I'm getting at is we can easily let either other people's perceptions of us or how it makes us feel go from veils to masks as we start maybe trying to fulfill a role. And then I'm even going to take it further, and I'm going to suggest we live in a culture where that's okay.
Well, I think the word stigma is closely related to all this.
Interesting.
Because I think that there's stigma on a lot of things
Mhm.
that force people to put on a mask in order to keep their job, or in order to get a med they need, or in order to do other things. So I think that, and some stigmas go back, centuries. So I think that that's a closely related word, and that ties into society and how you are, forced to either you're going to be honest 100% and you're going to suffer the repercussions of that, or you're going to put on a mask to do what you have to do.
That's a great point. But I think it also speaks to what we're talking about, because again, culturally, if we feel we have to do that, it suggests what kind of culture are we really living in that
we can't be real.
yeah. Or yeah, go ahead.
Can I just give me a tangible example of like a stigma?
Okay, so let's say you have a psychic illness, like a psychotropic illness. Okay. And you know that you're bipolar or you have schizophrenia or something like that. Society forces you to hide that in order to keep your job or to get a job. Because if they knew the real truth, they would never hire someone.
Or look at how our country's torn by politics.
Right.
Yeah.
So people really say how you feel on the issues of like to your coworkers? Probably not.
Right, because, and Ellen, I'll get to you in a second, because Ellen had her hand raised. Yeah, you talk about the politics. I mean, I have later on, and I don't know where I had in a discussion, but I've been reading the last few years, listening to some commentary lately that because now everything's been transferred to the nation state, whereas these functions the churches used to do, and there's a lot of worship and veneration there. Religion and churches have been bucketed to a category you can choose or not choose. It's no longer embedded in reality, so it creates its own issue along those lines, right? And so it's a bit of a mess. Go ahead, Ellen.
Well, I think the conversation may have moved a little bit, but what I was thinking, and I apologize, I wasn't here for the beginning, but what you were saying, can we show off as present?
Mhm.
I think that there's a question of, like you were saying, everybody shows up differently, or we're almost at different parts of ourselves. Like we show up a certain way at work, we show up a certain way as a father or a mother, we show up a different way at a PT meeting, we may show up a little different at church, right? So we have, maybe you could call it masks, you could call it different parts of ourselves, but to be our true selves, if what you're asking is to be present as your true self in those times of crisis, or when you need to be present for another family member or a friend, etc. Like a big question for me is like, what does that mean to most people? And there may be things that keep us from being fully present, that keep us from being our best selves in that moment, like the best part of ourselves that can be compassionate and courageous, etc. Right? So I think that there may be some good reasons why you can't show up as your best self. What's keeping us from showing up as our best selves?
Well, I think
every day. I mean, that was just what I was sort of thinking about. And do people even know what it is to show up as your best self?
I think what you're getting at, and I like this. So you're talking about roles. We all have different roles at different
I mean, even just different ways of presenting,
Right.
like different ways of showing up. I know that when I walk into work, I am, I put on my most professional, most, and I think I don't think I vary that much, but I would hazard to guess that maybe some people do show up quite differently at work than they do at home.
I don't think that's false per se, in the sense of we have different roles in life at different moments. So all I'm saying, within those roles,
Mhm.
how genuine are we? How real are we? How fully present are we? That's what I'm saying. So it's not so much and certain roles demand different things.
No,
Just
right. So what I think though is like those to show up as present for someone. I
Mhm.
think you show up as the most centered, reflective self, right? You want to be your best self at that time.
But what I think she's saying is like there may be situations or things that happened to you in the past that come into play when you're trying to be your best self
In certain situations.
in certain
and with
situations.
people.
oh yeah, you're right. So we all have things, our
Mhm.
imperfections,
Right.
and they're gonna manifest itself at different time. And some go
Right.
ahead.
But I think that is what you're saying is that if to show up as our best self, to cultivate that, is that what's going to keep us from becoming
I think
affected by evil?
I think so. Let me try to be let me try to express it pragmatically so it makes sense as best I can. So simply put, what's Christ command us to do? To love one another as I have loved you. So
Right.
in the situation you're in, whatever role you're in, whatever it demands, how are you manifesting that? And maybe in that your example, if it's a casual hello, but you send somebody once more, maybe you're in a rush. Maybe you take that time to say, Lord, I'm going to trust whatever I got to do will get done, but I need to listen to this person now. Or there's certain, and that's not something to like cognitively drive yourself crazy with. Like you have to always. It's going to be it's going to be the natural result of the things we talk in here as we live the sacramental life and grow.
But a lot of that, I think, goes back to something that I keep saying in here. Having that discernment that you just mentioned, to me, has a lot to do with, you mentioned sacramental life, but also to me has a lot to do with where you are
Shut the door.
in terms of your relationship with Christ.
Well, that's what it all gets down to. We're all at different places at different times. So, and this is what we're trying to help each other with in this room, and it all comes back to that.
So I think what we're getting at here is, as adults, we play different roles at different times. We're parents, we're spouses, we have a professional job. So obviously you kind of hone what you're doing there. If I hear right, I think one of the things that I've always dealt with, I did a lot of contracting for years and worked in a number of companies. Some of the companies were downright immoral in my thing. And I remember one of my for a hedge fund and talking to, I wasn't buying into the deal they were saying. And there was another person a little older than me. We were both kind of had temporary contracts. And I said, you can serve God or mammon. And I was looking around going, and this is mammon. And part of the deal was, do you keep your faith in what you learn here? And then you're out in the real world. Somebody wants to make a contract and they want to have a sweetheart deal, or, a lot of that is, can you take your faith and bring that into the other parts of your life? How you treat your children, how you treat your neighbors, the work, the professional things you do. How do you treat the people that come in and work on your house? Are you trying to get them to cheat you at work? You're trying to keep honest. That's especially, you were talking, Mike, before about how where the church was kind of embedded in everything, the way it used to be. And I know for my yayas and papuas, that's the way they grew up, right? So that was a little easier. Now we've got everything so cut and secular. How do you take your values as an Orthodox Christian and bring them into the work world? I remember I'd gotten a book. It was written, I think he was Protestant, but it was a really nice little book about that question. How do you bring your Christian values? It was called God is My CEO. So of course you can't have anything religious in church, but in work. But I back in the day, I had a bookshelf and I keep it open and I just keep the book there and a little bit out. And you have no idea how many people came by and asked to borrow the book.
You know what, George?
But of course,
I've found because people can Google me and if you Google me, I didn't realize this until someone told me. If I'm Google, the first everything that's going to come up is going to be religious in nature.
Yeah.
So I've had many clients Google me or prospective clients, and one thing leads to another. They end up on the quotes list or something. People are more
Oh yeah.
that people are more receptive
Yeah.
than I realized. But I want to get back to something you said. So I think it's a perfect example. So you're like God or mammon, right?
Yeah.
Haven't we all been in situations where we feel compromised and we maybe realize or think maybe we're not making the best choice?
Mhm.
This is what I mean about the mask. Being real and being present with yourself is to be honest about that and not fall into self-deception that over time starts turning the veil into a mask. That's what being fully present starts with yourself.
Yeah.
Don't lie to yourself. Oh, well, you know, everybody does it, blah, blah, blah. And what I'm saying is we live in a culture that accepts that.
Yes.
So therefore it's easy to think you're behaving correctly, but Christ is truth. Anything less than truth is less than Christ. And that starts with how we evaluate ourselves. It doesn't mean we flagellate because he's not there to punish us, but it starts with the honesty. In your case, yeah, I'm compromising. I'm choosing mammon. I'm afraid. Talking, Father Alexander talk about fear. I'm afraid if I don't make this choice, I'm going to lose my job and I can't support my family. That's understandable. Absolutely. No one's going to condemn that, but at least we need to be real with ourselves or there's no growth. So that help? Is that
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
and
okay.
it's exactly like sin too, because
So-
you start with something very small,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden it keeps growing,
Yeah.
growing,
Kind of
and
like the
growing.
snowball at the top of the mountain.
The mustard seed, the mustard
The
seed in
mustard
reverse.
seed.
Yes.
You know, that's what I mean. So it
Oh, yeah.
starts with ourselves. So Boris is, I think, honest. And that's hard. I would submit to you that's hard. And especially like in all the roles we have, especially if we're somewhat glorified in our role, which isn't a bad thing. Let's say you're really good at your job or you're really good at something and people seek you out because you're good at something. What happens when you're not so good in a moment? Or what happens when you don't have the answer? How do you behave?
Or
You
you're a leader trying to help other
Yeah.
people stay on this course. And then it's really hard to be like, oh, wait a minute, I need some help. It's hard if people are looking to you to admit that you're struggling or to get help or what have you. And so then I think is a time when you're forced to wear a mask. You'd be like, I'm fine. And
Well,
you're not. And
or there could be cases when you recognize you're exuding a force that keeps things stable,
yeah.
and you know that if you say certain things, it's going to unglue some people around you, things like that. So what do you do? Well, I think what you do is you discern what's the better course, but at the same time, don't lie to yourself and say to yourself, I'm okay. Maybe you need to talk to someone privately or you need something, but you got to keep it real with yourself. You might have to say to yourself, yeah, they're looking to me and I discern that I need to keep this together. But what I'm ultimately getting at is to get those falsehoods we can slip into to become the seeds of self-deception that leads to, because what starts here comes out here. This is what we see with leadership all the time. This is why leadership is so hard. Leaders may start off good, but at some point, power corrupts and it gets really difficult.
I also think that we're humans and there is this like human dynamic. When another person acts a certain way, you're kind of forced to act like balance out. And it's easy to like either become polarized or demonize the other person, like on a work team or what have you. And I think then if people aren't in harmony, if people aren't working well as a team, like it's upon both people, even the person that's appears seemingly less toxic or whatever, to be like, no, I have to be rooted in my principle. I you know what I'm saying? I feel like I have seen that at my work, and it's interesting how another person can touch off an imbalance in a situation, which is unhealthy for everybody. And unless you address that, you're not being true to yourself. You're not being true to your team, and it's just bad for everybody. That just
It's very difficult situations, and I know there's no easy answers what we're talking about.
Yes.
But the root of all this, though, is this class is themed on icons. Like what I do every day when I get up. When I do my prayers, I'm standing right in front of this icon of Christ, and sometimes I can look at the icon. Sometimes I have trouble because things are just difficult, and I feel naked and exposed because I know how I'm really behaving or how I'm really feeling, and it's important to begin your day with that type of raw honesty. But the cross is horizontal and vertical at the same time. Love God, love others. It's not enough just in your private moments and then go out and keep that veneer. You have to have people in your life that you're also holding you're accountable to. That dynamic, that communal dynamic that keeps us all in the place we need to be, because we're all going to fail. We're all going to screw up. We're going to do it, daily. I mean, I was joking with Mary. This lesson is all about hypocrisy, and the way I behaved the last couple of days watching sports events. I have no business teaching this because, I was not my better self, and I embraced it. So, it's kind of like, it's tongue in cheek, but you see what I'm saying? This dedication to truth and honesty is really difficult, especially with the virus of sin in us, but you look around, you look at leadership, you look at a society that's, I don't know, maybe I'm taking this too far. I've always thought it astounds me how we're, advertising and marketing in some respects are predicated on lies. Not all the time, but there's so many lies that go on.
Creating need.
Or there's something behind it. I'm looking at you, John, because I shouldn't say anything because I'm thinking of industry examples, right? But I don't want to, nothing you did. Right. Certain things that you scratch beneath the surface are driven more by the dollar. Not that there's no value completely in what they're doing, but the real push is something than what's on the surface. And that to me is lies. It's it's just so pervasive. I think as individuals that are part of communities, it's really easy to buy into. And rather than being condemning of others, and I'm pointing fingers at stuff, that should all make us look, okay, what am I doing? What's going on in here that I'm exuding outward? So, who had a question? Andrea.
Well, building on what Ellen is saying,
Yeah.
it's really hard when you have that toxic person, and it's just going to infiltrate, and you're on that balance between being diplomatic, professional, and just letting it rip.
Right.
And saying what needs to be said. And then my personal battle is when you know how certain people function, and it's a characteristic of that person that you're not going to be able to change that person has to take responsibility for changing themselves. My battle for myself is not to go down that wormhole. Because when someone is doing things not for the better, everybody identifies it.
Right.
Everybody knows. But now the person turns their head in the wrong direction, and that bothers you. So
Exactly.
you can't. So the biggest battle for me is to just look at things objectively when you know what that person may be capable of, and not go down that wormhole. And that's why I go to my support system and say, I want you to watch me. I want you to see what I'm doing. I self-evaluate, but I want you to be able to come and tell me even the things I don't want to hear.
Right. Well, that's
Right.
it.
So that you have that support system, so that you can stay straight. So that turn of the head, which means nothing, isn't going to send you down that wormhole.
Right. So that's right. Like, I feel like, so there's this person that I had never worked with anybody that was so, blatantly, anyways.
Yeah.
I won't go on. We'll talk. Would tell all these crazy things that they were doing, illegal things, and somehow this was fine for people. So it's easy to react, but for me, what I've ultimately learned is like, what is showing up as my best self, and cultivating that, and just when you feel that rush, being like, okay, I'm rooted in.
Yes.
I have to be my best me. Because you're losing if this person makes you react poorly, but like showing up as what we want to be. Because me reacting to what I may perceive as toxicity or evil, whatever, they can't let you down, right? But I have to cultivate like showing up. I have to your self has to be, your course has to be strong to be rooted in the face of that and continue to be non-judgmental, etc.
Well, right? It gets back to, I think, in these examples, again, it gets back to what Christ said about loving others. So, for example, I'll use myself as an illustration. So I'll tell you where I've failed before. I can be very confrontational and combative when pushed, extremely so. So there's been situations that have evolved where someone was being toxic, and they essentially needed to be stopped. And I was successful in stopping them, but I was unsuccessful because my motivation was to stop them. I wanted to win the victory. And even though the outcome was good for others, so that's failure. It's success and failure. Now, it's not failure if what I keep in mind is, yeah, maybe I don't want to do this. This is going to get a little ugly, but it's loving to that person, because for them to persist this way is not good for them or good for anybody. It's a different orientation. Now,
Right.
doesn't
Instead
mean
of love for them.
right. And you see this in Christ. I don't know if we're going to get into it with the time we have, but what I have here, whether it's the end of this time or next week, I want to show you some examples where Christ said some really scathing things.
Yeah.
You're talking about hypocrisy. If you do a search on the English word hypocrite, hypocrisy, you will find that it was used by him more than anybody else in the Bible by far.
Yeah.
So he had something to say about this behavior. But yet, there's not one instance, even when he was doing this, that he was actually condemning a person.
Yeah.
It was condemning the behavior to beget change. That's what it was.
And the key thing that I think Ellen's getting at is, and Andrea is, learn this from a wise former spiritual father, is the discernment again. But like you said, the cross is both vertical and horizontal, so we have to love others and love ourselves. But notice that Christ commanded that we love everybody, but he did not command that we like everybody.
Yes.
And that discernment is, I think, very central to some of the things that we're talking about here, because we are commanded to love one another.
I'm just laughing because I heard a priest say, I only love other people because God told me I have to.
Well, that goes back to Mike's statement, right? Like, we're going, in your situation over there, you may have to deal with it. Do you deal with it out of because you're angry at the person in hatred, or do you realize, there's another approach which spins you up, right? Or the other approach is, if you can reach that point of time, is in a way it's almost a detachment, to the extent of, it's like, all right, I don't know what's going on in this person's life, or why they're where they're at right now, but I do need to fix this. And then to come at it with a more, I need to fix the problem. Maybe it's not your job to fix the person, so to speak, right? You just want them to behave and do what they need to do. But and Mike, if I'm right, it was to the point where you were getting like almost ticked off at the person, or angry, or a little.
It became a personal thing.
Well,
yeah,
because I'm competitive. I can be combative, so it becomes about winning and losing. And in certain instances, especially when I was younger, because the outcome was going to be virtuous for many, I construed that I was the warrior doing the right thing, blah, blah, blah. But then I realized later, and some of it was, I can't go back and rectify because it's circumstances and people have moved on. But I realized, well, maybe I did something somewhat positive, but I don't know that I think I drove that person or those people into the same behavior, if not worse. You know what I'm saying? And so whenever, and these situations demand a lot of prayer, a lot of thinking, a lot of caucusing with your loved ones and friends that can help you. It's not easy. And it's not, and culture doesn't make it easy, because culture supports a lot of like the behavior I said about myself. They would support it. They were like, yeah, champion, whatever. It's not, it's not good. And so you have to undo that stuff. So I think that's what it gets down to, is just how do you keep in mind loving the other person? And the likability thing, that gets in the way too, because that's all about some, ephemeral feelings, sometimes surface level thing. Love is an action. It's almost immaterial whether you like the person or not. It's the action. So
it's really interesting sometimes when there is a person causing issues in an organization. Everybody knows it, but because you're the person being like, oh my gosh, if you will vocalize it, and if it gets to you, other people just sit back. And so one day I said, you know what, for Lent, I'm giving up on, everything's fine. I'm not, And of course, other people take up, when there's an issue to be dealt with, somebody will take it up. But if you're got your mind all wrapped up about it. It's like, oh, calm down. You know what I mean? So I think that sometimes we have to say, like, is this my problem even? Is it best for me? Am I the person who's supposed to deal with this? And maybe it's not always. Sometimes we're reacting to something that we see of ourselves in that person.
Yeah, sometimes.
So, I mean, I do think that, like, even just sometimes flipping a switch in our mind and seeing that person with love and treating that person with love can sometimes, it's like a paradigm shift. You know what I mean?
Well, it is, and I'm saying it absolutely is. Love, humility. These are things Christ taught us because they always work. Problem is we don't always apply them right.
Right.
We get caught up in things, but if at least we're trying within our imperfections to be real, be fully present, to love the person, especially our enemies, right? Our enemies in a situation we perceive to be our enemies. At least we're starting from a place that's better than where we can sometimes normally start. Maria, I saw you. You seem like your wheels are turning. I want to give you an opportunity to say something if you want to.
Well, I just had a recent happening. You know the happening. I told you. I told you about when I was in Greece.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Right.
So
You're right.
it's a little story that we were all around the table up in the mountains with goats around us and homemade wine and whatever.
Got to get that homemade wine in there.
There were about 8 of us at the table, and one person, Orthodox, married to a Catholic woman, and the Orthodox, and I don't mean to.
I know.
To do it.
Yeah.
Okay, so, and he was a chanter before, so he grew up in the choir and everything too. So the next person I have next to me is a nun, a previous nun from Catholic.
Former nun.
And she's married. She has children now, but she was a former nun. So all of a sudden we're just eating, and I hear across the table, the difference between the Orthodox and the Catholic, there's one main difference, and that's the filioque. And he couldn't even pronounce the word. And I was trying to tell him, and I'm like, huh? That's not true. I said, that is not the major difference between. And then I kind of started with the sacraments and so forth, and I was talking, and I see the nun turning here and the other person over there looking at me, because I was telling the truth of what I knew. Okay. And it was a difference. I'm not saying right or wrong or whatever. I was talking about the difference.
Right.
Okay? So all of a sudden we get up from the, and the nun's like, she turns to me and she says, well, in the communion, it's, don't you believe in the body and the blood of Christ? And I said, of course we do. Of course we do. That's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about differences in how we get there. Okay. So in the meantime, all of a sudden afterwards, I see this person talking to this person talking to this person. And I know I was abrupt, and I knew how I was, going after it, because I knew that I knew. So I said to myself, I didn't sleep that night. So I woke up the next day and I went and I apologized to everybody, not for what I said, but how I acted, because I knew that if they didn't hear what I was saying, I wanted them to hear what I was saying, so they go look it up. Okay, go look it up and do that. But if they were so combative and so, against what I said, they would have, left it. So I just thought I would.
Yeah, it's a good. That's a good anecdote to share.
How'd it go over?
It went over very well, because everybody was kind of relieved after that, and very, I apologized to the two.
But you could have easily not. You could have chosen not to.
I could have not done that, and then what would have happened is then they would have just said, "Well, we're right. We're doing this," and they would have missed the message. They would have missed the whole message.
And it wouldn't have continued to foster the relationship, or the relationship as it should have been at that moment. So we're right at time. Oh, go ahead, Andrea.
I was just going to say how much that reflects on your positive character and the continued self-reflection, where you felt like that, and you knew you did it just as much for yourself as you did it for them, right? Because you felt.
I felt.
Yeah, after self-reflection. So maybe all,
I offended.
because we're all going to make mistakes. May we all be able to do that.
But it's
And admit it.
it's because in all of us in this church, in this room right here, and you out there, it's the commitment to Christ that enables us to have those moments of conviction, and we have them more and more the deeper we go. Well, I'm going to stop there because I think that's a good place. So next, we're going to start, for those of you that are going to come next week or listen online, we're actually going to get to the etymology of the word hypocrisy to kind of take us down another path to explore this issue further. But I do want to end on a quote, because as the Holy Spirit would have it, there's a certain blog I read each week by Father Philip Lemasters. He's an Orthodox priest in Abilene, Texas. And we've had a couple of exchanges over email from time to time. And I find him to be just a right to the point. When he wrote his sermons, right to the point. So I just want to end on this uplifting quote that he wrote that I think, again, I came across it this morning. I'm like, wow, this is really Holy Spirit talking. This is germane to our point. He said this, and he begins by quoting St. Irenaeus. The glory of God is man fully alive, and the life of man consists in beholding God. That's St. Irenaeus. Here's what Father Philip says. To be a human person is to bear the image of God with the calling to become more like him in holiness. The more we do so, the more we become our true selves. The God-man, Jesus Christ, came to restore and fulfill us as living icons of God. He enables us to become truly human as we participate personally in him as the second Adam. So again, I think that just sums it all up, what our mission is.
Yeah. Can
And-
you share that quote by email or something?
Yeah, just remind me. Just, text me, email me, remind me. I'll share anything. So, all right, so let's end there. We'll close in the Lord's Prayer. For those of you online, we're going to go now, but thank you for joining. And those of you that may listen to this throughout the week, post your comments. I do respond when I see them. So God bless everyone and have a wonderful week. We'll be back. I think we'll be back next 29th. So